So I'm often encouraging people to read deeply and engage with texts. And one of the things I mean by that is to go from reading through a whole text to highlighting and annotating and working with it and thinking through it to then making and taking notes so that you can work with the ideas. And so this is something that I'm often asking for in the classes that I teach. And I'm going to take you through a very quick process of what I mean by that so you can get on with this work in your own context. So here, for instance, is the web-based article Inquiry in the Age of Data, a commentary by Marilyn Cochran-Smith and Susan Lytle. And you can see here in this version of it, there's no highlights or annotations. It's just the web version. The next thing you would do as you're engaging with it is to highlight and to annotate. So I'm going to show you a version. This is the PDF file of just one section of it highlighted up. And I use both green and yellow. For me, the green are the ideas that really stand out that I want to make sure that I dig deeply with, and yellow is also very important. And a lot of people say only highlight the most important things in an article or text. I like to highlight a lot because of what I do with it after. So this would be like sort of like a second way of engaging with the text with the highlights. And then we move to making and taking notes. Now, for the longest time, I just stayed with this, and I would bring this to class and I was ready to go. But I think making and taking notes takes the work and your thinking to the next step and really helps you remember the big ideas of what was in the writing. So this now is my literature notes. So what I do is for each article or chapter, I have a file. I'm using Obsidian in this case. I have some metadata added over here. And then what I start to do is I start to write these key ideas with headers. Most of the time, the headers that I'm putting into my note are not necessarily in the original article because they're my way of making sense and making meaning. But what you'll notice is I am copying and pasting verbatim the text from the original so that I can remember exactly what the author said. If I want to paraphrase or put my own ideas later on, I want to make sure I remember exactly what the author said. So if we were to go through Inquiry as Stance Differentiated from Action Research, all of this comes from this one large section called Inquiry as Stance. You'll notice that the authors here, they do a really wonderful job of organizing and structuring this article out, but there aren't additional subheadings within that section. For my notes, even though all of these pretty much come from that large section, you can see I have lots of headers for the ways that I was making sense and making meaning of what was in that text. So for instance, I have Inquiry as Stance differentiated from action research, but then I have the very next sentence is troubles the status quo. So here we positioned Inquiry as a stance and then fundamental to inquiry as a stance. And so here's that second sentence. So if I were to only rely on this, I would have, oh, okay, these are two important ideas. When I look at my notes, I know what those ideas are about because I have sort of labeled them. And then I also tend to write my own notes or questions to myself. This is very specific to the class, the curriculum class. And so these are just a couple of questions. And what I do is I put them in a way where I know very clearly that these came from me. So I use these double backslashes and then I usually italicize. And so this is how I organize the entire article. Here's 3 dimensions of inquiry as stance. What they do is they have first, second, and third. So they've done, again, a really wonderful job of organizing this for us. For my own thinking, when I want to go exactly to an idea, I have in my notes the 3 dimensions, and then I have the dimension that's dealing with local and public knowledge right here. I have the dimension that's dealing with teacher learning across the lifespan, and I have collaborative inquiry among teachers, and then additional themes that I was making sense of. So each individual person who's engaging with this text is very likely to have different kinds of headers and ways of organizing their own notes because of their life experiences, their ways of making sense of the article, their interest, any projects that they're working on. So when you are working with the text, when you take your notes, organize them in a way that makes sense to you. But for me, going into a class or a conversation or a project with your annotated and highlighted PDF is even more powerful when you can go into it with the notes that you have, and you have those ideas right there at your fingertips. The next thing that you would do after that, yeah, there's more, is you would start to make connections with other ideas and notes that you have in 2 ways. One, by taking each of these notes and turning them into concept-based notes. I have a whole other video on that. And also making links to other notes. You could see here on page 102, they're talking about in teaching, the term practice has typically been used to refer to doing, acting, carrying out, or performing the work of the profession. Often this term is juxtaposed with the terms theory and research to suggest both relationships and disconnections. And so this is a theme that comes up in many of the classes that I teach, and also in a lot of the writing that I work on. And so I have a whole note on theory and practice. And you could see this little 14 means there are 14 other notes that I have that connect to this note on theory and practice. I'll just make it pop up here for a second. So you could see this came from Gloria Ladson-Billings, and then there's these other kinds of notes. So it's a pretty short note because I still haven't built it out the way that I need to. But when I saw this, I was like, oh, this relates directly to that theory and practice note and the ideas because of what they're talking about here. So as you prepare your own notes, you want to, if possible, organize the ideas and the themes with your own headers. Make sure that you have the citational information so you can go back to the original source and have everything that you need. And then make your concept-based notes and make your links across your notes and add your own ideas and perspectives and questions in there. And that will get you in really good shape when you're reading and engaging with texts.